I am Bob Schrader from Kindred, North Dakota, and I graduated from high school in New Effington, South Dakota in 1962, and back then everybody got drafted or you volunteered for service. So my twin brother and I volunteered for the Army right out of high school, and went to Fort Leonard Wood, North Dakota, Missouri, for basic training. And from there I went to Fort Rucker, Alabama for maintenance school on fixed wing aircraft. Started with the L-19s, went to the L-20s, top of the class went on to Otter, and they needed 14 people to be crew chiefs of the Caribou, the brand new twin-engine big plane that the Army had. And so the top 14 in the class of Otters got to go on to Caribou multi-engine school. Unfortunately, I was number 14, so I made it in. And when I graduated from multi-engine Caribou school, I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and January of '63, this Caribou we're sitting in was delivered, and I was assigned to it as assistant crew chief. And when we got 18 of them ready to go, we took them to Saigon. We flew the east route through Europe, and we were the maintenance ship, so we were a wee bit heavy when we left, but I had some weather problems in the Azores coming across there. The cockpit was leaking and all of our radios got wet except the bottom one, and that we could hear but we couldn't talk on it, so we had to stay close to the airplane ahead of us to find the Azores landing strip because it was kind of nasty weather up there. And I remember that part of the trip. The rest was uneventful. We went to July 4th, we got to Saigon. From there, this airplane and I went up to a city called Hue, H-U-E, and up by the DMZ, and our job was to, number one job, of course, was with Americans, was to get the American CIA folks to the border of Laos and North Vietnam to gather information for President Kennedy. And the rest of the time we hauled the Vietnamese troops excuse me, to out to the Ashau Valley to prepare for the upcoming war. And the first time I remember this particular plane getting shot at was probably about 3 weeks after Kennedy was assassinated. We were coming into the Ashau Valley and somebody said, "You're getting shot at." Before that, it was a pretty uneventful stay in Hue, Vietnam. In February of '64, we took this one and we flew over to Bangkok, Thailand to do skydiving. And then March '64, we came back to Vung Tau, and this one went into maintenance, and then it went into a company called Air America in Laos. Excuse me. I was given Caribou 593 because this one went into Laos in Air America. So I was given Caribou 593, and that one, May 5th of '64, Sergeant Nelson had a backache and an 18-hour flight, and I had a little 8-hour flight, and he wanted to come in to see the doctor, and he asked me if I would trade airplanes with him that morning so that he could take my 8-hour flight and come in early, and I would do his 18-hour flight to Cambodia. So I said, sure, I'll do that. The reason I had the short flight that particular day was that I had volunteered to fly the chaplain around on Sunday, so then on Tuesday I got a little 8-hour flight to because I worked on a Sunday. So I gave him my plane and my crew, and he took off, and I took his crew and his airplane. And about 10:30 in the morning, I sat on his airplane listening to mine catch on fire, crash, and it killed everybody. And there were 16 people on board, and that was the first major air disaster of the Vietnam War, and it was also the first time anybody was killed on a Caribou or in the 61st Aviation Company. So I remember sitting in Sergeant Nelson's airplane listening to the Mayday and the crash, and I started thinking, I'm a lucky 20-year-old South Dakota kid, and my second thought is, what is God doing? Why would he save me and wipe out Sergeant Nelson, who had a wife and a kid and 3 kids, and I was just a 20-year-old single person. And years later, well, after that incident, then I was flying another airplane, Don's, because he was dead, so they gave me Don Nelson's airplane. And when I left Vietnam in July of '64, the airplane that I was crewing had 23 bullet holes in it already, so the war had started. It was, in my opinion, it was time for me to get out and go back to the States because my year was up, which I did. Now, one of the experiences I remember over there that was my first medevac run, we were flying into Saigon, and we were probably 200-300 kilometers north and of Saigon and a little west, and the American soldiers asked us if we could come down and pick up this little about a 10-year-old boy that was the Viet Cong had tied him to a stake, set him on fire until the village chief told the Viet Cong where the rice was that was hauled in there the day before with one of the caribous. And the American soldiers came in there and got the Viet Cong out of the town and cleared enough runway where we could land to pick up this little boy. So we dropped in to pick him up, and of course as soon as we landed, the Viet Cong came back on the runway. So we had to, the American soldiers kept hollering for us to get out of there or we'd never make it. So I remember loading up the mother and the 3 live kids, putting them on the back side of the airplane, and then the one on the stretcher I laid at my feet. And by that time the pilots had the engines revved up, so the tires were starting to slide because we absolutely had to get out of there. So I laid on the floor, I left the doors open, cargo and the ramp door. I got the ramp up far enough where it wouldn't hit when we rotated. And I just laid on the floor and grabbed the little guy and hung on to him the best I could. But when the pilots popped the brakes for the takeoff, the little boy slid a little on the stretcher, which caused his death. So I laid him on the floor, closed the door, ramp door, left the cargo door open so we could see. And I remember turning, looking at the mother, and I looked into her eyes and I could see she knew that her son had just died. So it was a long trip to get to Saigon. We sat and watched the sun go down, got to Saigon. It was dark. The Vietnamese had already left their post at the tarmac and there was no lights on. And I unloaded the mother and the 3 kids, and then I took the dead one and laid at her feet. And by that time the ambulance was about a half-mile away, and we had another mission to run that night yet before midnight. So I got back in the airplane and I told the pilot to go. So as we taxied away, the mother and the 3 kids disappeared out of my cargo light, and I'll never forget the look on their faces, especially the mothers, to be stranded 300 kilometers from home with 3 live kids and 1 dead one and nobody around to counsel her. So I always wondered what the rest of her story would be. And July of '64 then is when I left Vietnam, and I went to the 11th Air Assault in Fort Benning, Georgia, and they were getting another Caribou crew ready to go back to Vietnam. and I elected to get out of service, went back to school in Minneapolis, Brown Institute, got my radar license and my first-class radio license, and went to work for AT&T, Northwestern Bell in Fargo, North Dakota. Now to forward 20-some years, the internet came out in 1998, 99, sometime in that time frame, and I was looking on the internet to see what the Army charged that crash to, because I was the one that inspected it, I was the one that serviced it, signed it off as flyable, and it caught on fire and crashed going out of Tam Hip. So I was looking for that, and I found this one on the internet, and I looked at the tail number and said, this is my airplane, the one that I was first crew chief of from January of '63 until March of '64, and I was one of the crew members that ferried it over to Saigon, and it was owned by the Army Aviation Heritage Foundation, and they had restored it back to original specs, and I emailed them and to verify that the plane was original and the tail number was correct, and they said yes, it is, and they said they'll be in Oshkosh July of 2000. I said I will be there to meet you, because Oshkosh is only about an 8-hour drive from Fargo. So my son and I went to Oshkosh and met up with the Army Aviation, and found the airplane sitting with the warbirds, and joined the Army Aviation Foundation, and I followed the airplane then up to Anoka, Minnesota, where it was for one winter, and then Cavanugh Flight Musuem purchased it, and then I asked if I could come to Cavanugh Museum to stay with my plane and help maintain it, to make it a living memorial to honor the Vietnam vets, and they were delighted to have me come with the airplane. And for the last 10, 12 years now, I've been coming down to Dallas and helping out, putting on show with the airplane to honor our Vietnam vets, so that they can come in here, tell their story to their family, and start more of the healing process, and share it's a good tool for them to have to come in and show their families what was going on in their life when they were in Vietnam. So it's an honor to be a part of that process. I don't know how much. What else? Here's a picture of my twin brother and I when we first joined the Army back in '62, and here's a picture of me before I left Vietnam, and this is which one is it? And when I first got this airplane in December or January of '63, I took a picture of my sitting in a cockpit pretending I was a pilot, but I was 19 years old when I first got this airplane. In I believe it was 2007 or 2008, Cavanugh brought the Caribou back up to Oshkosh. We were doing the show, and I was doing the show and tell, and Mr. Whitman from one of the local papers wanted to do a story on Carl Grimes, who was killed in the Caribou when it crashed, and he was from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, so he wanted to do the story on Carl, on how he died when my Caribou crashed. And I said I would do that, except we'd have to get a hold of his wife Jackie and let her know that this video is being made because of out of respect to Carl's wife. So they found her, and she said that was fine, and then we invited her to come to the Caribou the next morning to look through it if she wanted to, and she said yes, and she showed up that morning, the Cavanugh folks brought her up to the airplane, and I asked her, first I told her who I was, and that I was the one that put her husband on that airplane, I was the one that serviced it, I was the one that signed it off as flyable, and it caught on fire and crashed. And if you want me to tell you the rest of the story of Carl's, I'll do that. And she said, yes, that's fine, I'd like to know about Carl. And I said, how much do you want to know? And she said, everything. So, so I took her in, and we started the back here and showed her where Carl was sitting, and some of the pictures. I got her up into the cockpit and sat her down as a co-pilot, and I sat in the other seat, and I said, now this is basically what happened when the airplane crashed. And I showed her how the co-pilot would be trying to put out the fire, feathering the engines. The crew chief would be telling the pilot that the left engine is still on fire, and the pilot would be looking for a place either to belly it in the rice paddies or do a short final and save the airplane. And by that time the left wing lost lift, and the plane inverted. It was about 250 feet high, and it inverted and it landed on the windshield. And that was the end of 16 people. And she was appreciated hearing the story, but it was probably one of the most emotional show and tells I ever did. What else could I tell you about this airplane? We've done a lot of air shows with it. There's many Vietnam veterans that can't even come on here yet, because in the old days, before the Hueys got over there, this Caribou was the lifeline to the jungle. It's very capable of 1,000-foot grass strips. The shortest runway we ever used was 850 feet, and the plane is 95 feet wide, so that's a pretty short runway. And what we did there, we had to carry everything in to the jungle and carry everything out of the jungle back to Saigon or wherever with the Caribou. So we used to put, and most of us crew chiefs loaded and unloaded basically the same way. We put the wounded ones up in the right corner to keep all the blood in one corner, and then we'd put the good soldiers along the left side, and then the body bags you'd put on the right side, so the good soldiers had to sit there looking at their buddies in the body sacks, and that was extremely emotional for a lot of soldiers. Nowadays, hopefully they separate the loads where they carry the good soldiers in one airplane and the deceased ones in another. But there's a lot of vets, when they come in here, they kind of look to the left side when they come walking around the corner, and they instantly remember the body bags that we used to carry in here at the same time. And that's still, even after 50 years, it's still something that bothers a lot of veterans yet. So hopefully they can come in here, like again today we're doing an air show. They can come in here and tell their families and start the healing process and move on from there. And back to Jackie's story, she had lost Chris a couple months before the interview, because he had MS and he died in a house fire. So she was hurting already. I shouldn't say hurting, but she was wanting to know everything about her first husband, Carl, and it was, I felt sorry for her, because it was, she had just lost Chris a couple months before that, and then to go through an experience about her first husband, but she appreciated knowing the rest of the story. And Carl was a type of guy that was always helpful, and he was like to come along and take pictures for his son Chris that was born while we were in Vietnam. So it was kind of a pleasure to have him ride along at times. So if anybody wanted to see the picture of the crash site at Tan Hip, go to Google image and put the tail number 61-2593, and the first picture coming up should be the image of the plane laying in the rice paddies upside down down by Tan Hip. But that's it was on the internet on 61-2593, and you go on image and you'll find the picture of it. Okay, this is how the Vietnamese hauled their sea rations around. They didn't have refrigeration or sea rations, so we hauled pigs and chickens and cows and ducks and rice, live weight pigs and chickens. And one day we were coming out of Saigon, and I was sitting in here. I had chickens, ducks, and pigs in the back half of the airplane. There was one Vietnamese lady sitting back here with me, and just one dumb chicken got his head out of the wicker baskets that they were in, and he trying to peck me in the leg, and I didn't think anybody was looking, so I opened the door of that little basket, and I got that chicken by the neck, and I winged him out the back door. And he did his skydiving routine, and the last time I saw him, he was leveling out and having a pretty good pattern heading down toward the trees. And I thought it was kind of funny, but the lady sitting back there with me probably didn't think that way, because that was probably her dinner. But we had our fun. Here's a picture of the airplane original flying over the Himalayas. You can see we did not have any reverse pitch, or in fact we didn't use oxygen either, and we were supposed to, but I had just lit up a cigarette and I didn't want to put it out, so we didn't open up the oxygen. But I'm always kind of curious now on how high we were to get over the mountains, but we made it without oxygen. And here's a picture of me. I believe this was after mine crashed, because the guy I was training to replace me so I could rotate to the States was killed when my airplane crashed. So this picture was taken probably 3-4 weeks after that. And this Caribou is known as the Flying Donkey. And it had 23 bullet holes in it when I left Vietnam. If I knew I was going to have my personal airplane back restored and have the honor of doing the show and tell on it, I sure wished I would have took more pictures. But when you're 19 years old and working 16, 18 hours a day, you don't have time to really take a lot of pictures anyhow. But I could have done better than what I did. I hate to get into medals and stuff, but I'll share with you a little bit, because when we left Vietnam, most of us threw all of our medals and stuff in the drawer, got rid of our military clothes, and went back to being a civilian, because the war was such a hated war. Back then it was the flower children, and Jane Fonda was popular, and not the Vietnam veterans. But I reordered my medals just for my grandkids. And I see I had 5 air medals, and yeah, let me find it here. And I had the Expeditionary Medal and a Vietnam medal with a Bronze Service Star and a few others. But so I did gather all back up and getting them ready to let my grandkids have them. I found it. Yeah, I had 5 air medals, also awarded the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, as well as a Vietnam Service Medal with 1 Bronze Service Star, and good conduct and all that sort of stuff too. But we were not into medals, and we never will be. But just for the record, I did I did get a few medals, but it's nothing that everybody that was over there got medals for Vietnam War. So when I got out of service in June of '65, I went home, of course, to Clear City, South Dakota at that time, and I decided I'd go to Minneapolis and get a job because it needed money to live on. Most people around home, they basically never talked about the Vietnam War. Everybody hated the war, so you just pretty much forgot it and get over it. Because when I left to go home, the sergeant said, if you get any issues, get over it. That was your checkout. And I went to, when I got to Minneapolis, I decided working in a factory is not my life either. So I went to Brown Institute Electronics, got my radar license and my first class radio license, and then picked up a job at Northwestern Bell Telephone in Fargo, North Dakota, and I still live up near Fargo. I worked for Northwestern Bell for 32 years. It was a good life, and I really enjoyed splicing fiber and running caterpillars and all that sort of things. And now I don't think I even told the kids much about my Vietnam experience until they were probably out of high school, because it was such a hated war that nobody ever talked about it. They just, in fact, I had people on my crew that after I retired, I worked with them for years, and the one of them after I retired told me how he was flying around in a O2 trying to pick up bullets so they could mark spots for the Air Force to bomb, and we had no idea that he was even in the service, let alone a combat veteran. The war was hated that bad that you could have people on your crew, and at the time I only had maybe 10 employees, so we were a small crew, but nobody really knew who was a Vietnam vet or who wasn't. And now finally, after 50 years, people are starting to share and get over the trauma of the Vietnam War.